Do you know what God's will is for you over the next 24 hours? There's a lot of good options out there, right? A lot of different things you could do, a lot of wonderful things. Are any of those okay? Or does God want you to discover the best possible one, that one thing out of a million that is the best possible use of your time, that's God's will for you? Jesus taught us to pray for God's will to be done on earth in Matthew 6:10. How do you discover what that is? How do you know at any given moment what God's will is for you? Should you pray and then ask Him, just what should I do? And then just listen for a response, or see if you get a prompting from the Spirit? Should you use wisdom to figure out the best of all possible options? Exactly what does God expect from you? When we look for the best course of action, the one person in this world that we should marry, or the best possible educational track, or the ideal job, or that one in a million thing that's God's will, that approach to life, I believe, is a misunderstanding of our role in the world, why God created us. Think about why God created mankind. God told us when He made mankind, He created man and woman, He said what our role was. Genesis 1:26 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our likeness, in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule." Okay? It's the first thing God said. Let us make man, let him rule. Our task in this world is to rule as kings. We are to be co-regents with God, reigning with Him over His creation. That's why we were created. That's the direction that all human history is moving towards, that the purpose of redemptive history is to get there where we reign with Christ. 2 Timothy 2:12, if we endure, we will also reign with Him. It's the goal of redemption. It's the goal of everything God is doing. And you get to the book of Revelation, and chapter 5, verse 9, it says, and then they sang a new song. They're singing over the glorious final culmination of everything that God has been doing forever. You are worthy to say, they're singing to Christ, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain and with your blood purchased men for God from every tribe and language and nation and people. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on earth. Okay? That's where it's all going. We are God's servants, to be sure, but that's not all we are. God also wants us to function as kings, co-ruling with Him over His world. If we were only slaves, if that were the only relationship we had with God, then God might have simply said, you know what, I'll just tell you what to do every moment and you do it. I'll give you a prompting, you do it. And that might be more a role of a robot even than a slave. Even a slave has some kind of discretion in how they do things. But God didn't want us to be robots or even mere slaves. He wanted us to be slave kings. And what does it look like to be a slave king and reign with Him? As God's slaves, as His servants, and as His children, we strive to make sure everything we ever do is pleasing to God, right? We want it to be the boundary of everything we do. Whatever it is, it needs to be pleasing to God. At each moment, He wants you to look at the countless different ways that you could proceed, that you could please Him, and pick one. Which one? Your choice. That's the king part. Your choice. In Acts 5, when people were selling their property and donating the money to the church for the poor, to help the poor, was God pleased by that? Yeah, if they did it with good motives, He was pleased. That's a good thing to do. But does that mean God expected everyone to do it? No. No, you don't have to do that. We know that because when Ananias sold his land and then he lied about how much of the proceeds he was actually donating, he got punished for lying. But before his punishment, Peter explicitly said, he made a very interesting remark in Acts 5:4. He said, "Didn't it belong to you before it was sold?" Now think about that. Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? Literally, wasn't the money under your authority? That's what that means. Wasn't the money under your authority, Ananias? You didn't have to give it. You didn't have to donate it. God, who owns everything, delegated decision-making about that parcel of land and the money that came from it to Ananias and his wife. He didn't have to donate it. He had the freedom to choose whatever he wanted with that land, as long as it was something in the boundary of pleasing God. And now, of course, he wasn't free to do evil. Our freedom that we have as kings lies squarely inside the boundaries of God, of what's pleasing to God. Our freedom is not license ever to dabble in evil or even permission to wander close to the line. Not at all. But it is freedom to choose among the countless good options. That's what God wants us to do. He prefers that instead of just telling us, giving us a prompting, do this, okay, now do that, turn here, go left. He doesn't want to do that. Here, think about it this way. Suppose you had 3 children that you're homeschooling, and you just do your study, and then you take a break, and it's like, okay, wouldn't an hour break or something like that. And your oldest daughter, she goes next door to the neighbor's house and tells a friend about Jesus. Your son uses the time differently. He uses the time to clean up his room and his brother's room, just to be nice. Your third child, he just hangs out with you, and the two of you have this great conversation because he's just being really honest. He just shares his heart with you, and in a really honest way, and you just have this really good conversation. Okay? Are you displeased with any of those 3 kids because they didn't choose the best possible option of how to spend that time? No. No, you're pleased with all 3 of them because they all 3 chose something good, right? As a parent, isn't that scenario that I just described better than if the kids would have said, okay, what do you want me to do for the next hour? And you just said, okay, you go to the neighbor, you do this, you do that. And then they just went and did it. Isn't it better that they chose those things? I mean, don't you take some delight in seeing that creativity? Seeing this kid is different from this kid, and he chose it this way and he went this way? As long as they're all doing good things that please you? That's better. God likes variety. Is that not clear from the way he created the world? The night before his death, Jesus praised Mary when she came with her extravagant gift. Remember, she poured that expensive perfume worth a year's wages on Jesus in Mark 14. What she did, it was wonderful, exceedingly pleasing to God and pleasing to Christ. And he said she's going to be remembered forever for this. But does that mean that everyone should have done what she did? Should all the believers in Jerusalem have lined up with vials of perfume and just kept dousing Jesus one after another to prepare his body for burial? No. No, that wasn't required. Jesus never commanded anybody to do that. He never suggested anyone do that. He never rebuked anybody for not doing it. When he commended Mary, you know what he said? He said, she did what she could. She did what she could. The implication is, you do what you can, right? Maybe you don't have any expensive perfume. Do something else. Maybe it doesn't even occur to you. Maybe you got perfume, but it never even occurs to you to anoint Jesus' body in preparation for burial. That's okay. That's okay. You don't have to be Mary. You don't have to do the same thing Mary did. God wants you to express your love to him and your trust in him in your way, in your unique way, as long as it's a way that's pleasing to God. You're not Mary. If you try to be Mary, it's not even going to come off well. You're not going to be very good Mary. Just do something, anything that's pleasing to God. That's what it's like to live as a king. You decide. You create a kingdom of good works for God. Does God expect you to pick the very best possible option, the very best possible way of honoring him at all times? Does he expect that? I don't think he does. First, we couldn't. Only God knows what's best. Yeah, you'd have to know the future to know what's best. We don't know what's best at any given moment. And God doesn't reveal that to us. He doesn't show that to us because he wants us to function as kings, not just mere robots. Secondly, if everyone picked the one best thing, there'd be no variety. I don't think God would like that. There'd be no variety. It'd be kind of goofy to have everybody come anointing Jesus with the perfume and everybody doing the exact same thing all the time. Think of it this way. Look at the creation. Which of all the plants that God created, which one is the best one? I don't know. Maybe you could make an argument, the oak tree, right? Oak tree is a pretty awesome tree. You know, it's clearly more impressive and useful and reflects God's glory, I think, in greater ways than, say, reed in the marsh, you know, or something like that. So if oaks are best, why didn't God make every single plant in the whole world an oak tree? Well, that wouldn't be very good. That wouldn't be as good as what we have, the variety of vegetation. Some great, some little, right? Some plants are better, inferior, superior, inferior, whatever. But the world as a whole is more marvelous because of the variety. That's what God wants. He likes that. When you make decisions, instead of just trying to figure out the best possible option, which you can't do, think of each of your days as a work of art. Okay? When Mozart completed his Symphony Number 41, considered one of the greatest symphonies, was it a bad day because it wasn't Beethoven's Fifth that he wrote? No. I mean, you might argue that one is better or the other is better, and you might prefer one or the other, but no matter which one you preferred, aren't you glad they didn't both write the same one? Aren't you glad we have both? And that one didn't get left unwritten? God made you a little king in this world and delegated authority to you over your possessions, your money, your skills, your gifts, your creativity, your abilities, and He wants you to every day produce a work of art, a unique work of art that comes from your heart. No other child of God is like you, and He wants to see what you're going to do. This is why when the Bible speaks of God's will, instead of listing specific actions, it's God's will, you go here, say this, do that. Instead of that, it gives moral principles, right? It's God's will for you to be holy in 1 Thessalonians 4. It's God's will for you to do good, 1 Peter 2:15. To be thankful in 1 Thess 5. And to support missionaries in 2 Thessalonians 8. Those are all said to be God's will. I mean, just general moral principles. Everything the Bible presents as pleasing to God is the canvas of His will. And on that canvas, He commissions us to paint our own masterpiece each day. We can paint whatever we want on that as long as it's on the canvas, and He doesn't want us to go on the wall or something outside of those bounds. But God doesn't want the same painting from everyone. Some may paint better than others, but each of His children, as long as they stay on that canvas, He says, well done, well done. And He's pleased. He's pleased. What does God want you to do right now? Answer, something good. It's just something good, something righteous. Does He want you to try and figure out from Him which righteous thing? Well, maybe sometimes, but most of the time, He just wants you to be creative and choose something good. So today, enjoy your freedom. Serve the Lord. Reign with Him as a slave king.